On May 15, 2025, the world's trade arteries froze as the U.S. Department of Defense abruptly ordered the Panama Canal shut, citing a cryptic national security threat. Ships of every size were stranded, global supply chains snapped, and the cost of rerouting around Cape Horn soared, fueling panic and inflation worldwide. International leaders demanded answers, but Washington's silence only deepened the mystery. Unlike the accidental Suez blockage, this was a deliberate, open-ended move, prioritizing U.S. security over global commerce. The world waited, breath held, desperate to know what threat could justify severing the planet's most vital trade route. The Panama Canal isn't just an engineering marvel. It's the beating heart of global trade. It slashes thousands of miles off shipping routes, moving 6% of the world's maritime commerce and nearly 40% of U.S. container traffic. American grain, energy, and manufactured goods all depend on its smooth operation. The 2016 expansion made it even more critical, accommodating massive Neo-Panamax ships and amplifying its global reach. Its sudden closure triggered a domino effect: higher costs, delayed deliveries, and mounting uncertainty for industries worldwide. The canal's promise of predictability was shattered, leaving the world economy exposed and vulnerable. The seeds of crisis were sown months before the shutdown. In his January 2025 inaugural address, President Trump threatened to reassert U.S. control over the canal, citing Chinese influence and steep toll hikes. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a China hawk, warned that Beijing's presence in Panamanian ports posed a direct threat to U.S. interests. The U.S. bristled at Panama's 200% toll increase for LNG carriers and growing Chinese investment. Panama defended its sovereignty, insisting toll hikes funded vital infrastructure and water management. Tensions escalated, with both sides digging in. Panama asserting independence, the U.S. demanding security guarantees. The canal became a powder keg, primed for confrontation. By May, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown. In the days before the shutdown, the canal zone buzzed with unease. Locals spotted unmarked, black-hulled ships and drones patrolling the waterway at night. Rumors of an explosion near the Miraflores locks spread among dockworkers, but official confirmation never came. When the U.S. order arrived, military assets swiftly blockaded both ends of the canal, Marines securing key facilities. Panamanian authorities fell silent as American forces took control. A canal pilot recalled, "We were ordered to drop anchor by U.S. military radio. Armed boats appeared, firm, not hostile, nothing moved. The world's trade lifeline was cut, and those on the ground were left in the dark. All they knew, it was a matter of extreme national security." With official details scarce, speculation exploded. Some experts pointed to a cyber attack, foreign hackers seizing control of the canal's automated systems, threatening disaster. Others suspected a covert military incident, an intercepted submarine, a smuggled weapon, or a clandestine operation gone wrong. Eyewitness reports of explosions and unmarked vessels fueled these theories. A third possibility, a catastrophic hazardous spill, forcing a secretive quarantine to protect Panama's water supply. Each theory pointed to a different culprit: state actors, rogue operatives, or environmental catastrophe. The truth remained locked behind classified walls, leaving the world guessing. At the heart of U.S. anxiety was China's expanding footprint, a presence that seemed to grow with every passing year. What once appeared as simple commercial activity was now viewed through a lens of strategic competition, as Chinese influence reached into the very arteries of global trade. Chinese state-owned firms operated key port terminals at both ends of the canal, giving Beijing access to shipping data and, U.S. officials feared, the ability to disrupt operations. These terminals, bustling with activity, were more than just logistical hubs. They represented a foothold for China in a region long considered vital to American interests. American analysts warned these commercial outposts could double as intelligence hubs or sabotage platforms in a crisis. The presence of advanced surveillance equipment and the movement of sensitive cargo raised alarms about the potential for espionage or even covert interference, should tensions ever escalate. The 2025 toll hikes, coinciding with deepening Panama-China ties, were seen in Washington as economic coercion. U.S. officials worried that higher costs could be used to pressure American companies or allies, subtly shifting the balance of power in favor of Beijing and making the canal a tool of leverage in broader geopolitical negotiations. Panama, a major Belt and Road recipient, insisted its relationship with China was purely economic, and its canal management neutral. Panamanian leaders emphasized the benefits of foreign investment and infrastructure development, arguing that the canal remained open to all and that national sovereignty was never in question. But for the U.S., perception was reality. Chinese-run ports and rising tolls turned the canal into a geopolitical flashpoint. The symbolism of Chinese cranes towering over the waterway, combined with the financial implications of toll increases, fueled suspicions that the canal could be weaponized in a future conflict. The waterway was no longer just a trade route, it was a battleground in the U.S.-China rivalry. Every ship that passed through, every container offloaded became part of a larger contest for influence, security, and economic dominance in the 21st century. The stakes had never been higher, as the world watched to see whether the canal would remain a symbol of global cooperation or become a flashpoint in a new era of great power competition. The shutdown unleashed a diplomatic firestorm. The U.S. framed its action as a grim necessity, protecting the canal and the hemisphere from an unspecified threat. President Trump declared victory for America first, blaming Panama's China ties for endangering U.S. interests. Secretary Rubio insisted the U.S. had a duty to keep the canal neutral and secure. Panamanian President Mulino, outraged, called the move an act of aggression and a violation of sovereignty. He demanded U.S. withdrawal and restoration of Panamanian control, protesting at the UN and OAS. Both sides dug in, their narratives irreconcilable: security intervention versus illegal occupation. The world watched, caught in the crossfire. The crisis plunged the world into a legal maze, where every move was scrutinized under the harsh light of international law and historical precedent. The Panama Canal, a narrow ribbon of water connecting two vast oceans, suddenly became the epicenter of a global debate over rights, responsibilities, and the true meaning of sovereignty. The 1977 Carter-Torrijos treaties were meant to end decades of tension, granting Panama full sovereignty over the canal by the end of the century. Yet, embedded within the fine print was a crucial caveat: the de concini condition, a U.S. Senate reservation, which allowed the United States to act unilaterally to restore operations if the canal's neutrality was ever threatened. This clause, born of Cold War anxieties, was intended as a last resort, a safety valve for American interests. When the canal was shut down, Washington quickly invoked this condition. U.S. officials argued that foreign interference and mounting instability endangered the canal's neutrality, making intervention not just justified but necessary under the treaties. The world watched as American legal teams cited decades-old agreements to defend their actions, insisting that the U.S. was upholding its duty to keep the canal open for all nations. But critics, both in Panama and abroad, countered that the de concini condition was never meant to be a blank check for intervention. They argued it was designed to reopen a closed canal, not to justify preemptive action or military involvement. Legal scholars and diplomats debated the true intent of the treaties, questioning whether the U.S. was overstepping its bounds and undermining Panamanian sovereignty. The dispute exposed the fragile compromise at the heart of the 1977 agreements, a delicate balance between Panama's right to control its own territory and America's enduring strategic interests. Tensions flared as both sides accused each other of bad faith, and the canal's workers found themselves caught between two flags, uncertain whose orders to follow. The 2025 crisis shattered that balance, forcing the world to confront a fundamental question. In a moment of true emergency, who really holds the power to decide the fate of the canal? As ships sat idle and global trade ground to a halt, the answer seemed more urgent and more elusive than ever before. The outcome of this legal and diplomatic standoff would not only determine the future of the canal, but also set a precedent for international law, the limits of American power, and the rights of smaller nations in a world of shifting alliances. The world's most vital waterway had become a battleground, not of armies, but of lawyers, diplomats, and politicians, each fighting to shape the rules that would govern the 21st century. The stakes were nothing less than sovereignty, security, and the future of the global order itself. The sudden closure of the Panama Canal sent shockwaves rippling through the global economy, disrupting the very arteries of international trade. For over a century, this narrow waterway has been the lifeblood of commerce, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and enabling the flow of goods between continents. Its absence was felt immediately as the world scrambled to adapt to a new and uncertain reality. Shipping costs soared overnight, oil prices spiked to record highs, and supply chains buckled under the immense strain. Supermarkets in distant countries saw empty shelves, factories halted production, and consumers everywhere felt the pinch as essential goods became scarce and expensive. The crisis exposed just how central the canal is to the ongoing rivalry between the United States and China, as both nations scrambled to secure alternative routes and resources. Tensions flared at international summits, and alliances that once seemed unbreakable were suddenly under strain. Allies and trading partners began to question America's reliability as the steward of this critical global trade artery. Diplomatic discussions grew tense, and the world watched anxiously as leaders debated the best path forward. The best-case scenario would be a swift, transparent resolution, one that restores confidence and establishes a new, robust security framework for the canal. Engineers and security forces worked around the clock, while international authorities convened to chart a path towards stability. But the longer the shutdown drags on, the greater the risk of a global recession. Shipping companies are forced to reroute vessels around the tip of South America, adding weeks to delivery times and billions in extra costs. Economists warn that a prolonged crisis could force a permanent realignment of global shipping routes, reshaping the world economy for years to come. The world has learned a hard lesson. Our reliance on strategic choke points like the Panama Canal is a vulnerability that cannot be ignored. Other routes like the Suez Canal are now under increased scrutiny, and nations are rethinking how to safeguard their supply chains. Whether the cause was a sophisticated cyber attack, a covert operation, or an environmental disaster, the outcome is the same. Global stability now hangs in the balance, dependent on the decisions and actions of a single superpower and its allies. As the world waits for answers, the future of the canal and the global economy remains shrouded in uncertainty. The choices made in the coming days will shape not just trade, but the very fabric of international relations for generations to come.